So, about a week ago, I picked up the Fable Anniversary Collection on the Steam Summer Sale. And the first thing I sort of thought when I saw that was, damn, it's been like a really, really long time since I've played like a Fable game, especially the first one, which I admittedly have a lot of nostalgia for. It's one of those games that I can't seem to dislike no matter how much like my critical eye has not a lot of great things to say about it, but something about it has always just made me, you know, be able to play this game anytime and not ever really have like a bad time with it. I grew up like I had an original Xbox growing up, my brother and I, and when we first got this game, I thought it was just the coolest fucking thing in the world. Like, man, an RPG, all I'd ever played up to that point was like JRPGs and I never really experienced anything of a Western RPG before. We didn't really have a computer back then. We didn't really have, console games back then. There was maybe, Knights of the Old Republic, but I couldn't get into like the combat. I was always more of like, I need an action game. I need like action combat. So when this game sort of came into my life and I realized like, wow, it's like an RPG like that Oblivion game, but or maybe Morrowind was the more relevant one at the time. But it's like, it's in third person and you've got like the combat looks fun and you've got all these abilities and like good and evil, you can make choices and your choices, affect how people think about you and stuff like that. That was all the most like novel, cool shit that I've ever tried. I don't quite remember when this game came out. I probably didn't get it when it did come out, but at the time that I actually played it, so when it was new to me, I had played like the Elder Scrolls Oblivion. I remember I borrowed a copy of Oblivion from my friend Chris on the Xbox, and I played it for like a half hour and out to an hour max, and I just like could not get into it. I was just so dumbfounded at how much I was not enjoying it. It just felt so flat and lifeless and everything that I didn't want to play about a game. Like I wasn't really into, excuse me, action games or sword play type games in a first person perspective, and just I didn't enjoy the leveling system, and I just nothing about it was clicking with me. And then eventually I played Fable, and I thought like, man, this is like what I feel like Oblivion should have been. This is what I feel like, these Western RPGs should have been striving for. It was a really weird, I understand nowadays that's a really like contentious opinion because the reputation that these games have is like one of, Peter Molyneux basically hyping them up into oblivion before they come out, and then when they come out, they're nothing like he says they are. But when I played these games, I didn't learn about any of that until after I had played them. I was totally like isolated from all of the hype, all of the whatever. To be honest, I'm not even sure how I got this game because my parents were not like super strict, but they were somewhat strict on rated M games. So I'm assuming my brother got it, who's older than me, and I just happened maybe he didn't like it, and I just happened to pick it up after him and really enjoy it. So I do have a lot of nostalgia, a lot of. I'm so sorry for yawning. I do have a lot of nostalgia and a lot of memories, of Fable, and I can't say that any of them are particularly negative memories. I remember well, I remember a lot, but what I distinctly remember was all of the things that Fable sort of introduced to me, things that games could do that I'd never seen before. Obviously, the morality system, and I do have to say, like, if you've never played Fable, is not like this is the thing about Fable for me at least. Fable is one of those games where, like I said earlier, it's really just it's not the best game of all time. It really isn't. It's at its best, I'd say it's extremely like average. I would never say it's like bad. I would never say it's, it's lacking in certain areas, but it is not the worst game of all time, but it's certainly not like God, I'm sorry. It is certainly not, breaking any records. It's certainly not like It's not defining any genres. Let's go with that, And but something about it just, I think Fable to me was really just like the pinnacle of sort of game feel. It really just had this feeling when I played it that I couldn't put it down. I felt really engaged. I always felt really active, and like what I was doing was fun, and like it mattered within the world. And like I said, it introduced a lot of sort of, I would say, probably standard concepts of Western RPGs into my sort of purview, like the morality system. If you do a good thing, which I always played a good guy. I remember. I mean, I have done a full bad playthrough, but the morality system where like if you do a good thing, you get a little meter on the side, and like uh saying you've done a good action, and when you do a bad thing, you get a little meter on the side saying you've done a bad action. Like the morality system is just extremely black and white. There is no middle ground in Fable. Everything is either a good or a bad action, which nowadays it's pretty silly, but it's like at the time to me that was the craziest thing of all time. And I'd never played a game like that because all I'd ever played were like action games or uh, you know, RPGs where your characters were unabashedly good, or games and where the villains were basically, unabashedly evil. They had depth, and they were complex, but at the end of the day, one character was good and one character was evil, and you always had to play the good character in the games I played, at least. So when I just had the option to just take my sword into a town and just cut down everyone who's in front of me, I was like, what? You can, this like feels, this like, it felt wrong, Not necessarily because it's like, well, yeah, obviously it's a bad thing to do, but it felt wrong because it was just not something I could ever do in a game before. I was never into like Grand Theft Auto. I was never into these open world kind of games where you can do that. But Fable really, for some reason, is the game that made me think about that. And the morality system in this game is really, it's not spectacular. Like I said, everything is extremely black and white. Plus, like, there are temples in this game, like religious temples, where you can just go and donate money, and if you donate money to those temples, you just get immediate good and bad points. It's really hammy and cheesy. It's like, it's so on the nose, which for all I know may have been the point, because there is some kind of cheeky humor in this game. It's everything. It's developed by a British studio, I'm pretty sure, and everyone has a British accent, and it takes place in this, basically this, the world of Albion, and it's like this pseudo medieval Britain with magic and monsters. But like, like if you go to the, basically what's just the Temple of Light, and you donate like 100 gold, you get like 10 good points. And e- the best part about it is that you could go around and murder an entire town. You could just, men, women, and children, take them all out. And then in theory, you could, if you had enough gold, you could go to the Temple of Light and basically just undo all the badness that you did by donating enough. Which is just such a, it's so funny that that's like, even like, the developers must have been laughing to themselves. They probably thought to themselves, like, some players will do this, not a lot will probably think to do that, but some definitely will. And something about that concept of just like the people of Albion being so like silly and ignorant that you could just go and donate enough money to the correct religion, and you're immediately like, all of your sins are actually just washed away straight up. Something about that is just so funny to me, and I feel like it had to have been put there intentionally, almost as like a joke. Man. So the morality system was new to me, and the fact that it was so black and white and so manipulatable was really entertaining as a child, and even is still now. And then when you get to the actual gameplay of the game, it was like, it wasn't Oblivion. That was like all I was looking for. It was like, wasn't this first person light, flat feeling, just a nothing. I got nothing out of playing Oblivion. I was either bored or I just felt indifferent. And when I played this, I was like, whoa, I'm swinging my sword. It feels like there's some weight to it. It feels like, when my hits connect, it actually feels like it hurts, which was like crazy to me. and I can like customize the look of my character. I can wear any type of armor I want. I can be in any type of class I want. Which it's like you really can't do any of those things either. That's also like the hilarious part. Oh, also going back to the morality system, certain like haircuts and getting certain tattoos actually like adjust your alignment. Like if you get certain tattoos, you get evil points and you get scariness. You know, I just love that. It's like it's like I wonder if that is in like any way. I'm not British, so I don't know the cultural norms, but I have to wonder if that's like almost like a cultural British thing where it's like tattoos are considered evil and scary, and you know certain haircuts are considered good, and like you know, is the culture really restrictive in that sense, and really not sort of open and progressive? It's a question I kind of have, and I wonder if it made it into Fable. It's a game made in a different studio, but or a different country, but it's, you know, when we think of America and Britain, we think of more of the similarities that they have than we do think of the differences, as opposed to like a Japanese company or a, you know, a Korean company or whatever, even like a Polish company. But when we think of like Britain and America, we're like, well, America basically started in Britain, and uh, you know, I'll be right back. I have to take a poop. Okay, I'm back. Uh, what was I saying? Different cultural norms. So yeah, I can't help but wonder if like the difference in, you know, America and Britain are more similar than they are different in many ways, at least compared to like America and Eastern countries like Japan, Korea, and China. And like I said, Poland, mostly referencing like CD Projekt Red there, but I don't know. I'm just gonna move on to the next. This is very unscripted, if you can't tell. I'm kind of just rambling and giving my sort of free association thoughts on this series. But in any case, talking about the gameplay, you know, at least compared to Oblivion, it felt so much more, you know, interesting to me. But in reality, the gameplay in this game is extremely just simple. It doesn't really reward high or low, like it doesn't really punish low skill. It doesn't really reward high skill. It's just extremely basic. There's magic, there's swordplay, and there's bow and arrows, you know? And you get enough experience with the entire game just to max out every stat in every thing by the end of the game. At the end of the playthrough that you're currently seeing, I had reached all of my max physical, and I get, what do they call it? Physical, maybe like dexterity, that's like stealth and speed and range, power, whatever. I had maxed all of those things out, and maybe I'll skip to a part later on where I have it all maxed out, but I had all those things maxed out, and the only thing I hadn't had maxed out were just like some specific spells where, you know, they just did more damage and more area effect. But it's like all you have to do to win this game combat wise is press the X button to slash with your ability, roll occasionally, and you can, it's like you cannot die in this game because you gather so, it's like, it's like, it's just not, it's not a greatly designed game in terms of combat and like life and things like I don't know how to say it. Just the mechanics are so easy, and it's maybe because I'm playing on the regular mode where they outright state that like, you know, the hero mode is where you'll have less potions and stuff. But I feel like there should have been less of a drop off where it's like, if the hero mode is hard, this is not just easy. This is like super easy mode. I don't think I died ever in the entirety of this playthrough. Like, died and got a game over because one, you have so many potions, they don't require a quick menu. You just press left on the D-pad and you use it, and it's basically a full heal. You have so many mana potions, which are basically a full restore to your mana, and you just have so much goddamn food, which all just serves the same purpose as potions. It just heals a little slower over time as opposed to potions, which are instant. You see on the left there, I got, well, on my screen, I don't know where I'm going to be at the video at this point, but on the left there in the D-pad, like the little thing, I've got poses and food and, you know, other shit, expressions, which was another thing I'd never really seen in another game before, like interacting with other characters outside of just like pre-written dialogue. It was like, whoa, you can like actually do expressions and poses and make certain characters love or hate you. You know, that was something I'd never seen before. You can get married in this game to a wife. You can get married to a man in this game. Like, this was the first game I'd ever seen where not only you could just get married to anyone you wanted, you could get married to a man or a woman. Like, Fable had, sure, it only had man-to-man gay relationships, but you could get married to a man if you wanted. Like, that was just a thing you could do, and they don't make a big deal about it at all. It's just an option. You know, obviously your character is always male, probably just because they assumed more men would play a game like this. In Fable 2, they they immediately made the jump to your character being a man or a woman. So it was like, you know, the game was progressing over time. But just to finish up on the combat and the gameplay real quick, it's really simple. It's just like, first of all, just max your physique, you know, max all your physical stats, then pull the sword out of the stone, then you have like the strongest weapon in the game for a certain amount of time, and then I mean, you swing all your massive weapons fast enough to where it doesn't matter. Get the inflame spell, and then every time you're surrounded, you just press B, and you do a massive AoE fire attack, which gives you a fuck ton of magic experience, and it does a fuck ton of damage. It's easily the best. That and multi-arrow are, in my opinion, easily the best spells in the game. Because one, it just, you know, multi-arrow is basically you just press the button, and then when you shoot your arrows, you actually shoot like 5 at once instead of 1. So you can just wreck anything from a distance, and when you're ever surrounded, you can just press inflame, and you can wreck anything that's surrounding you, and then at a one-on-one, you just use your super giant fucking sword or axe, and you just wreck it. You know, the game is not very difficult. And you basically can't get a game over because you see my health bar up there, you see the number inside that heart, those are resurrection vials, meaning you can only carry 9 at once to the game's credit, but if you die, you just respawn at full health and mana. So it's like, okay. And you don't get the game over. You have to lose all your resurrection vials for that to happen. Which is just like, it's laughably easy. Like, the game is broken and is easy so fast. The only like, I guess, thing that's hard to get are like weapons and armor, because they often are worth a lot more gold than you'll ever have at the time. But another thing you could do is like you could buy property and rent it out and like make money over time, which I swear doesn't actually work in this game. It works in Fable 2. You can become rich as fuck really fast in that game. But in Fable 1, I swear it never works, because it's just me, but I was positive I never saw like my money going up over time just by itself. So I don't know what's up with that. Maybe I'm just not paying attention, but it's just the idea that you could do something that cool or that sort of different or that sort of something that real, you know, you could really just sort of act out in this game kind of ways that you would potentially act out in the real world, which I just thought was really amazing, especially because it's supposed to be more of a grounded setting, a little more realistic, a little more based on fairy tales, but with humans and you know, it's as if, you know, the world was as it is now in the medieval times, just with monsters and magic, you know, which is kind of like what The Witcher does, but just way better than this. But man, yeah, I think, you know, and then I mean, the story of this game is basically non-existent. Your character is a mute. He doesn't speak ever. The only time you hear his voice are through the expressions where he goes blah or ha ha, like. He doesn't ever speak, and people just, of course, you have no name. You're a nameless, speakless hero. You're, you know, everyone just calls you hero. Your sister just calls you little brother. Whisper just calls you farm boy. Like, they all have their, you know, individual names for the things that they call you. Oh, the gooder you get, that your hair becomes like bright blonde and a halo appears over your head, and the worse you get, you become like pale white skin and you grow horns out of your head. Which, again, is just so cheesy and hammy, but I really love it. It's just like it's like a 10-year-old's idea of good and evil, but it's like an actual game, which I think is hilarious and kind of charming. And speaking of charm, the soundtrack to this game is like genuinely underrated, I think. It's got a really good soundtrack, even though it only has, I want to say, like 10 tracks. Like, the Oakvale theme is great. The Temple of Light theme is great. The Summer Fields theme is great. The combat themes are a little forgettable, but all of the ambient and sort of relaxing songs in this game are really great. I think that's part of why... I really do think that's like a big part of the nostalgia of this game for me, is that the music has always been able, like, music is hugely important in a game to me, and the music of Fable in particular, like, especially, just, I don't know, something about it has always just really, really clicked with me and really stuck with me. It's one of those game soundtracks I can easily listen to by itself outside of the context of the game. It's just very relaxing. It's very carefree, and I don't ever feel stressed when I'm listening to it. You know, it doesn't ever invoke those kind of emotions. And that kind of just, that sort of charm and like feeling just applies to the whole game. I'm never stressed when I'm playing Fable. I'm never like, you know, worried about what's going to happen to me or my character, like I'm going to lose big progress or, you know, anything like that, which arguably is a bad thing. I don't really feel a lot of like urgency in this game, but you know, it's kind of just like a relaxing ride. Like, even when I'm fighting bad guys, even when I'm doing anything, I know I'm never going to die, and I know getting through the encounters is really just requires very minimal effort, which normally, again, would be like a negative in a game, but something about it in Fable just feels like chill, you know? It's like not that big a deal that it kind of bothers me. Not to say that the game doesn't annoy me at times. They're like the escort missions I've never been a fan of. And Fable doesn't do much to remedy that, especially when it's just like you have to walk at their pace and not they have to follow you. But man, like, what else? Oh yeah, like sometimes I accidentally just press like buttons on shit and actually steal things by accident, and then the guards will come chase you and you have to pay a fine. Another great thing about Fable is it's like anytime you do a crime, you can just pay a fine and it goes away. Like, it just, the badness goes away. I don't know if that's some social commentary or anything, but at least on the clip I'm currently watching, I just accidentally stole some stuff, and the guards came running at me, and I had to pay 750 gold, and like, okay, I did it, and then they're just not mad anymore. like, it's just so silly. Man, my memories of this game are really, in a lot of ways, they're really clear. And replaying it on the Anniversary Collection was kind of a trip. Like, you know, having it in HD and having it with like updated textures. And I do enjoy that every bit of sound is exactly the same as the original. This is just a visual remake. And in some ways, I feel like it kind of loses the charm of the original game because the character models are not stellar. People have like bug eyes. Sometimes their eyes go in different directions in the cutscene when the camera like goes up really close to them. There's a lot of pop in on the textures mid cutscene. There's a lot of like rendering that happens in real time as you're seeing it, so it'll go from looking like bulky to detailed as you're watching the game in a cutscene, or sometimes just in the game itself. Like, there's a lot more, I would say there's a lot heavier bloom lighting and things like that. So it kind of loses a little bit to me the charm of the original on the original Xbox on like a CRT, which I think everyone kind of has a nostalgic feeling towards that sort of aesthetic. But you know, it was still nice to play it, you know, in the updated version, because I own I own 2 physical copies of Fable. I own the Lost Chapters on Xbox, and I own the Anniversary Collection that this is on Xbox 360. But then when I saw this was on PC on Steam for $7, I was like, oh, okay, got to do it, because I never actually got around to playing my Anniversary version on 360. I think the frame rate was too low, even like for me, which I'm usually pretty tolerant about that. But this one, the frame rate's not stellar, but it's more stable on PC. And man, you know, so after this game came out, I remember when Fable 2 came out. Like, that was one of the most like hyped games for me of my childhood. I think it came out when I was in my sophomore year of high school, I want to say. And no, maybe even middle school. In fact, it was middle school, I remember, because my group members from a Japanese class assignment came over, and some of those guys didn't go to the same high school as me. So if they were still around, that must have been middle school. So this came out, man, like a long time ago. Fable 2, I should say. And I was the most hyped fucking person anyone could be for that game. And I played the shit out of Fable 2. I fucking demolished that game. I spent hours and hours and hours. I would play it in secret because I wasn't really allowed to play a lot of games back then. is if my grades weren't good, and which they often were not. And uh, I played the ever looking fucking shit out of that game. And then like I loved it. I enjoyed it more than the first, even, I think, just because it felt smoother, it felt more, I guess, streamlined in some ways. People looked better, the combat felt better, the world was bigger, there were more options available to you in terms of how you want to like make money and interact with characters, and the story was a little better, not like crazy better, but a little. And you know, it felt like an upgrade in many ways, but I was missing some of the aspects of the original game where there were more spells in the first game, and the charm, I think the visual aesthetic was a little more charming. But I continued on with the series, and I was never able to really, I don't think I was ever really able to put my finger on why so many people had beef with this game and had beef with Peter Molyneux. I mean, at the time, I did not know who Peter Molyneux was. You know, I did not follow internet controversies or game controversies at the time. I was too young. I barely used the internet that much. So in later years, I found out like apparently Molyneux claimed this was going to be the Morrowind killer, or this was going to be like the fucking like the end to, you know, Bethesda and BioWare Western RPG supremacy. Like, and when I think about that now, it is pretty silly that he thought this was going to be the game, because I haven't like read or looked up any quotes about what Molyneux said you could do in this game, but just based on what everyone says, he seemed to make it seem like you could literally just do whatever the fuck you wanted, which is just not the case. You really cannot, especially when the morality system is so black and white. Which I have to question is like, really, is it that different from like Mass Effect when there's a clear like Renegade and Paragon path? I don't know. I haven't played a lot of Mass Effect, but yeah. So I guess that's a lot of why I think a lot of people sort of associate the game itself with Molyneux's sort of hyping of it, and that's a genuinely good reason to be disappointed when you're fed something that just turns out to not be true. That's fine, but I think eventually, you know, maybe people got a little too into that and didn't really appreciate the game on its own for what it is, which would also be fair if they don't want to, again, because I've already said that it's not really that great a game. It's the only reason it still sort of lingers in my mind is because of my fond memories of it, and because of all the aspects of games and RPG, like Western RPGs, that it introduced to me, that I would see a lot of more games in the future do much better. But this was my first exposure to so many of those concepts. So I'm really glad I played Fable. I'm really glad it was part of my sort of gaming experience. And it kind of was like one of the first games I played that made me realize that I am kind of a goody two-shoes, and I don't ever tend to do the bad stuff in games. I don't know if that's because I like fear punishment, or if because I don't know if I have too much empathy, you know, I'm too good of a person. But I always, you know, I've always been into like heroes and stuff like that. So playing as a hero who's just sort of unabashedly good, at least when I was younger, I don't really appreciate that type of character as much as I did back then. I appreciate more characters who are good, but, you know, don't always take the high road. Like, they're willing to do dirty stuff to do what is right and things like that. You know, I appreciate more, I guess, complex characters, because the Fable hero is not a complex character. It's entirely up to you, and you are given a very, very limited framework to work within. But again, it just introduced so much stuff to me, and the voice acting was always very cheesy and hammy. Just thinking about it now is it's so funny that this game like is still playable to me. You know, I consider myself, you know, someone who likes to play good games, and I don't like to play bad games. But even though this is not a great game in my mind, in terms of just, you know, when I really sit down and I think about it, it's one of those, it's a good game, it's a bad game that I like love. And I will probably replay it in the future. The current playthrough you're seeing, I was purely good. I did everything good. The next one, I will probably just become a psychopathic madman, just to see what it is, even though it's not my preferred play style. but I've only done it once before in my life, and back then it was harder for me to do than it probably will be now. But I'm not going to play it for a while. But it's I have fond memories of Fable, and it's a game I really do think a lot of people should play just to try it out. You know, it's not a great game, but it's an entertaining game to me. So, oh yeah, I should talk about Fable 3, I guess, a little bit. I don't remember when I got Fable 3 or when it came out. The only thing I really remember being so excited about for Fable 3 is I was excited for it, and I got it like on or close to release. But I remember the coolest fucking thing ever about Fable 3 being was like your weapon changes appearance based on your actions, which I thought was like a revolutionary fucking concept. I love like customizing my own weapon and customizing my own playstyle and fighting style, and having a sword that changed appearance based on what you did. That was the coolest thing in the goddamn world. There was nothing cooler to me. I mean, that was a sell for me, like on Fable alone, especially like Fable 3 alone. I don't remember when that one came out, or when I played it. That must have been high school, but like, man, the series has kind of gone to shit since then. Like, they haven't, as far as I'm aware. Maybe it was always shit, but at least from what I could tell, even like the Fable fans weren't that into like this Fable Legends stuff, or basically the non-Fable games they were making that just had Fable in the title. So after Fable 3, the series kind of ended for me there, and I hadn't played it for years after Fable 3 came out. And I remember a few years back when I was in my second year of college. Like, oh, sorry, I have to make sure to sync up the parts I'm watching with where I'm talking. But this guy just like executed this prisoner with a sword, and he just like basically hit him on the back. The guy's head did not come off at all. Like, which is just so weird to me, because you can literally shoot arrows at people's head and watch their head spin off their neck. So it's like, why couldn't they do this in a cutscene? In any case, Fable 3 came out, and like I said, I don't quite remember when that was. I could look it up, but I'm just watching the footage while I talk about this. And, you know, I don't have quite as many memories. I have fond memories of Fable 3, and I remember enjoying it. And I especially remember back in the day, like, playing co-op online Xbox 360 with people like in Fable 2 and Fable 3, and I thought that was really cool. But, man, Fable 3, I remember you're like a king, and you get like you're like a castle or some shit, and you like just have all the money in the world, basically. You become like, every Fable game like stepped up your importance in the world, where Fable 1 was like you were of this powerful bloodline of like heroes, I guess. And it's like, again, it's basically never explained, at least outright. You get like books from your sister where you're supposed to read and like learn about your bloodline, but like even then they're super vague, and it's never really like gone into details why is your family line is so important, which it just is. But then Fable 2 is like, I don't quite remember. It's like magic it's more in the future, and it's more industrial, which I also thought was like the coolest thing. Like, Fable 1 was like medieval with, you know, swords and sorcery. Fable 2 was like industrial revolution with like guns. It still had like swords, but also had like guns and bigger buildings and cities and industry, and more just kind of bringing it into the modern era. And then I believe Fable 3 continued that trend, but like, well, in Fable 2, you're like a kid. You play as a kid. You always start as a kid, I think. I don't remember in Fable 3, but and you just find out that you're basically the chosen one, and you find out that you're like meant for more in this world. And in Fable 2, you're just, I don't know, you're a super magic person. You have to gather the heroes that represent the different combat styles, and then you have to go beat up the guy who basically kills your dog at the end of the game, and that was unforgivable, I remember back then. And yeah, Fable 2 had a dog, like, which was also cool. Like, Fable 2 expanded in a lot of ways. Maybe I'll replay that soon. But and then Fable 3, you basically just become a king, and I'm like, all right, I feel like this series can't really I feel like it can't go much beyond this. But yeah, I feel like I'm running out of things to say, but the bottom line is that I just have a lot of fond memories of this game. I really enjoy the charm and the feeling the game has. I really do feel like it is not the epitome, but it's definitely one of the hallmarks of game feel, where the game itself is not spectacular, but something about it just I find engaging. Something about it just feels like comfortable and nostalgic. It's weird, and I wish I could explain it more, but it's clearly like a very personal thing to me, where not everyone is going to, you know, empathize with that feeling. Maybe not that feeling of Fable, but everyone I feel like has that game where it's like the game itself is probably not even. I feel like Sonic Adventure 2 is that game for a lot of people, to be honest, because Sonic Adventure 2 is not a great game, but a lot of people just nostalgia jack that game off like habitually. But you know, I can't really blame them though, because it's the same thing here with Fable. So it's like, man, you know, everyone has that game. Fable's not the only game like that for me, but it's definitely one of the games like that for me. So if you haven't given this game a try, I would recommend it. It's very cheap on the Steam store right now. At least it was during the summer sale. But I think even then it was only like $20. I'd say it's worth a try, just to like, I don't know, just give it a try, man. It's I don't think you'll regret it. I think at worst you'll have an amusing time with it. At best you'll find a game that's got some charm to it. It's got some it's got a feeling that amounts to being more than the sum of its parts, I think. So that's where I'm gonna end it. Fable, nostalgia, Liam out.